The Honorable the Speaker.
Member for Naparima, you have 15 more minutes of extended time.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just as I start this segment, I'd just like to make one correction for the record. And it is the statement by the member for San Fernando West that it was the UNC that signed us up to the Global Forum's Phase 1 and Phase 2 review. I wish to indicate categorically that the Global Forum conducts assessments of countries in two phases. Phase 1, where the legal and regulatory framework is examined, and Phase 2, which looks at the implementation of the framework. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago underwent Phase 1 evaluation, and that began on the 1st of March 2010. But the then PNM government did not respond to a questionnaire which was due on the 29th of March 2010. Slothful again, did not. It was under the People's Partnership government that we responded to the questionnaire on the 27th July 2010. And my source for that information is peer review Phase 1 report, the legal and regulatory, Trinidad and Tobago, OECD 2011, page 9. It was the PNM who signed us up for a fast-track review in 2016-2017. Facts are stubborn things. Facts are stubborn things. The second point I'd like to raise is the fact that we praise our leader. I am proud to be in a party and on the opposition led by the member for Separia. And who does the member for San Fernando West wish me to praise? He wished me to praise him? Not at all. Not at all. Not when I see the sloth and the laziness that comes out in terms of what we are debating here today. Madam Speaker, I'd just like to state our position. We will not support this legislation. We will not support this legislation. Our position is that the report should be recommitted to the Joint Select Committee for further work, including wider consultations with interest groups such as the Law Association, the DPP, the Judiciary, the Law Faculty of UWI, EU businesses in Trinidad, including Shell and Repsol and those companies, the Bankers Association, the General Public, and financial institutions. We wish, and we state here categorically, it has to go back to the Joint Select Committee for fulfilling the original mandate for reviewing the 3 bills. And while we're at it, the Joint Select Committee should also be tasked with finding out what are the EU and OECD requirements and to ensure that the bills we consider address those relevant points. Madam Speaker, when I had to suspend speaking for the break period, I was indicating that this legislation does not deal with our tax transparency requirements. It doesn't deal with the fair trading requirements of the EU, and it does not deal with the implementation of what they call base erosion and profit shifting measures. And when we speak about profit shifting measures, we are talking about transfer pricing, where businesses can transfer profits to jurisdictions with low tax regimes to avoid EU tax penalties, legitimate EU tax penalties. But here again, we see the slothfulness of this government. Because every year, in every budget, the Minister of Finance comes and talks about transfer pricing and what his government is doing or intends to do. And when you analyze it, it boils down to nothing, absolutely nothing. In 2016, the Minister of Finance said in his budget address on page 37, we are advancing work on the introduction of transfer pricing legislation. It's 2016. 1 year later, 2017, page 43, pending comprehensive legislation, we engage a transfer pricing consultancy to help us in our negotiations with Atlantic LNG. 2018, page 10, an international gas consultant has been engaged. And 2019, on page 21, we have become extremely concerned with transfer pricing malpractices, and the government has appointed an empowered negotiating team. So between 2016 to this year's budget, we have had absolutely nothing to do with getting us in a state of readiness to confront the challenge of transfer pricing as it affects the taxes, our own collection of taxes, and the fact that EU and other OECD countries could suffer from us being used as a tax haven. And in fact, they have said that in a report, that they are concerned about the fairness of the taxes in our jurisdiction. So, in summary, what are our concerns? We are concerned we do not know as we stand what are the official dates and deadlines of the EU. We heard one thing, we promised another thing, it keeps shifting like FATCA. We were told it was one thing and the heavens will fall, and then suddenly we were told that we had 4 months afterwards, etc. We need consistency so that we could plan and make decisions consistent with the timelines ahead of us. We are concerned with who the bill targets. The Joint Select Committee was informed that the Income Tax Amendment Bill was being enacted to ensure compliance with EU requests and would be applicable to, inter alia, EU citizens earning income and doing business in Trinidad. However, it could apply to Trinidad and Tobago residents who earn income in EU jurisdictions. So why it is, in this tax bill, we are seeing references to, and I'll just quote parts of it. So clause 4, subsection 5 of the bill states, notwithstanding subsection 1 and 2, where written law authorizes the disclosure by the board of any taxpayer information to an individual or entity, and it goes on. The legislation, Madam Speaker, gives too much power to the TT police service. They're good police, and they're rogue elements. I do not want TT police service interfering in my tax business. I have nothing to do with OECD countries or the EU jurisdictions. Section 4, subsection 6B of the consolidation of the amendments to the income tax says, and I quote a part, B, provide taxpayer information to a member of the police service of the rank of superintendent or above attached to the division or unit of the police service responsible for financial investigations or fraud solely for the purpose of, 1, investigating whether an offense has been committed under the Proceeds of Crime Act and the Anti-Terrorism Act. So he starts an investigation, somebody calls somebody and says Rodney Charles is involved, and they start an investigation, they seize my information, my tax information from the BIR. But it gets worse. This in subsection 3, the preferring of an indictment where such information can reasonably be regarded as being necessary for the purpose of ascertaining the circumstances in which an offense under any written law have been committed, or the identity of the person who may have committed an offense. So under any law, you catch me drunk driving, DUI, catch me whatever, or they investigating, under any law, they can go to the Board of Inland Revenue and ask for my information. How could we on this side responsibly allow the Trinidad and give the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that power? We have an inherent right to privacy. And it speaks to that point with San Fernando West Senate, and I must recall it for the records, where he said, the Attorney General, he said, we say, and I quote, we say there is no enshrined right that is being infringed. We specifically say that there is no right to privacy, as some people allege exists in this jurisdiction, but which our courts do not recognize specifically so. Well, I want to tell the Attorney General, I have an internal right to privacy, an inherent right to privacy. And nobody is going to interfere with my inherent right. And my tax information is my private business. In our dialect, there's a word they call for that. Maybe it's not appropriate and I could withdraw it, but I'll say, they call it precociousness. You too much want to be involved in private people's business. Could this information be used against me or against any of us? Maybe and yes. So we have, and I want to put this on record, that we in the opposition believe that there's a fundamental inherent right to privacy that is enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. The provision of taxpayers' information should be managed by the oversight of a judicial officer. A judicial officer is fair. It is an arm's-length relationship with the executive, and all of us have the belief that we will get a fair shake with judicial overview. But currently, Madam Speaker, the police have the power to apply to the court for an order for the BRI to produce tax information. This should be left as is. There's no need to put it in here. So we are, and the reason why, there's another reason why we ask all the bills to come to the floor at the same time. Contained in Clause 8 of the Tax Information Exchange Agreement Bill 2018. Yeah. Is a clause which states, quote, nothing in Section 4 of the Income Tax Act or any law of like effect prevents the disclosure of information where that disclosure is in accordance with and for the purpose of giving effect to a declared agreement. So if you, therefore, on the passage of this bill, there is no need for an amendment to Section 4 of the Income Tax Act in order for Trinidad and Tobago to be able to share tax information with other countries. As such, the amendments to the Income Tax Act at Section 4 is solely for domestic purposes. They want to get into our private business because...
Remember, I want you to be careful because that's kind of bordering on improper motive. So be careful about going on that route.
Okay. The Income Tax Amendment and Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters bills needs to be passed in order for us to sign the conventions with the OECD countries in order to make us compliant. It is a three-stage process. And we cannot move further without taking this first step by passing both of these bills. So, in conclusion, the bill is draconian. It gives too much power to the executive and it can be abused. 2, this bill by itself does not meet the requirements of the EU and will not get us off the blacklist. 3, it targets all citizens. It is overkill. I recall in the verbatim notes in the third meeting, Mr. Chair, no. What I just said, I'm quoting, the sharing of information with foreign countries is only with respect to their citizens. And I asked, their nationals? And he said, yes. The sharing of information with other tax authorities is only for foreign citizens. Madam Speaker, this bill lacks judicial oversight. And our position is that the report should be recommitted to the Joint Select Committee for further work, wider consultations, and bringing of the 3 bills to this Parliament, where we could look at the interconnectivity of the various bills to see the extent to which our citizens' rights are being given to the executive of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, as I said, we are for good legislation, and we will support and we're prepared to work to make sure that we meet the deadlines, whatever the correct deadlines are, so that we become compliant. Let it not be said that if this bill is not passed, that Trinidad and Tobago will remain on the blacklist. We will remain on the blacklist, EU blacklist, even if this bill is passed. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We've been debating for the last couple of hours the Joint Select Committee report to Parliament on 3 bills that were referred to it by this Parliament. Although the bill that is before us now is the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018, there were also 2 other bills, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 and the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill of 2018, which were also referred to the Joint Select Committee. The mandate of the Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker, was to consider and report by June 2018 on the 3 bills. An interim report was laid in Parliament on July the 2nd, 2018, via the Senate. And an extension was granted to continue the work until September the 14th, 2018, because at that time more work had to be done. That Joint Select Committee has now laid another report in Parliament, which is the one before us, September 17, 2018, and they have made the following recommendations. The recommendations are on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. In relation to the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018, your committee recommends that the House agree with its proposed amendments to the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 attached at Appendix 3 and consider and adopt the bill as amended by the committee. For ease of reference, a consolidated version of the amended bill is attached at Appendix 4. And then there are 2 other recommendations, Madam Speaker. In relation to the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 and the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, your committee asks that the House take note of the need to consider this legislation at the earliest opportunity to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago meets its obligations in the implementation of the international standards on tax transparency as required by the Global Forum. And your committee therefore recommends the resumption of proceedings on the Tax Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 and the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 in the 4th session, 11th Parliament, and that a committee be appointed to continue work on these bills. So it is clear that what the report indicates, Madam Speaker, is that the committee has not completed its work. It is not finished. But these recommendations are really majority recommendations because we have a minority report which has been included in the whole committee's report. And they have the minority members who drafted this report, members of the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago. They have recommended 3 things. That the draft final report not be laid in Parliament in its current form, as members of the committee require more time to deliberate, consult, and make recommendations on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. Secondly, 2, that on proclamation of the 4th session of Parliament, that the committee be reappointed in order to complete in its mandate, namely to consider and report on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, and the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018. And thirdly, that in the light of the commitment of the members undersigned to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago becomes compliant with respect to its obligations to the Global Forum, that we await the completion of the meeting between CARICOM and EU in order to ensure that amendments are in line with the conclusions of the discussions of the said meeting. Now, we have heard today from the AG that CARICOM has basically gotten a no to the request for a meeting with the OECD or with the Global Forum, I believe. And what that means, therefore, is that any chance of our participation in that is now over, and that it looks like there is not going to be a formal meeting with CARICOM and any Global Forum or related institutions. So that leaves us with the 2 other recommendations of the minority report. And when you look at these recommendations and you look at the recommendations of the majority report, you see that the only substantial difference here is that the minority report is saying we should not consider this bill because the work has not been finished, and that all 3 bills should be referred to the Joint Select Committee so that we can consider them together as we were meant to in the first place and bring them back here. And the majority report says, consider the first bill now, get it over with, and we recommend that the other 2 bills go to a new Joint Select Committee. So the positions really are not far apart, except that we find ourselves in a situation where we really cannot support the 1 bill before us without a full consideration of the 3, and I will explain why. It's not trying to postpone, as the members on the upper side indicate. It's not trying to prevent a bill from passing, and it's not trying not to meet the compliance requirements of the EU, and it's not doing anything to undermine the good name of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, that is what we are seeking to address here, okay? But I would like to say that in summary, the work of the committee is not complete. Secondly, not more than 1/3 of the work has been completed, and at least 2/3 remain to be completed. Thirdly, this is not a consensus report, as there is a minority report, and we saw that in the reading of the recommendations, understanding that there are things that converge. And I want to say as well that the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament are committees of Parliament, and they are accountable to Parliament and subject to the rules of Parliament. The executive, or the will of the executive, really have no standing in this process. And Parliament agrees on how to arrange and manage Parliament's business. So that if we wanted to do the reasonable thing, we could do it here in this House. And if we wanted to do an unreasonable thing, we could do it. But the point is that Parliament can organize its business in a certain way. The committee is accountable to Parliament. They've come here. You have 2 different views of how we should proceed, clearly. And the question is, how do we move this thing forward? Now, there are a couple points I'd like to make before I go into the substance of the bill itself. Rather, just 1 point really about the issue of jurisdiction in the parliamentary process, which is that no state other than Trinidad and Tobago has any jurisdiction over the parliamentary process of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. No institution, local, regional, or international, has any jurisdiction over the parliamentary process in Trinidad and Tobago. The courts of Trinidad and Tobago and even the Privy Council may rule on the basis of Trinidad and Tobago law and may rule on the constitutionality of a given law, but no entity, save and except Parliament, constituted by the members of Parliament, may determine how the legislature of this sovereign state of Trinidad and Tobago does its work. Now, someone listening to me, either in this house or listening as a member of the public, might think that my position is unrealistic or extreme, or even irrational in today's very, very complex, interconnected world. But I understand fully that the world is as it is, and that we in Trinidad and Tobago do not run the world. And I understand, therefore, the importance of the global forum and the agencies connected with it, including the OECD and the EU. I also understand that there is international law and international rules and conventions and practices that we observe and that we subscribe to. I also appreciate and understand that there are obligations by which we are bound. And there is such a thing as international good governance, just as there is good governance for a country. And I think that Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm sure the government is interested in this, as we indeed on the opposition are, we want to be part of global good governance and conduct our business in a certain way. But we also want to govern well here. And we want to be sensitive to the realities of Trinidad and Tobago, and to pass legislation and law that in fact takes the reality of Trinidad and Tobago into account, just as we take the realities of the international order into account. So I want to go back a little bit in time. So before we talk about crafting a way forward to where we are now, reference has been made to the former Minister of Finance in the People's Partnership government, Mr. Larry Hawaii, when he made a commitment on behalf of the people of Trinidad, government and people of Trinidad and Tobago, to the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, and this was on October the 30th, 2014. I have the article with me here, and the headline is Hawaii, Friday, October 31st, 2014, Hawaii TT committed to transparency. And he made this announcement while addressing the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes. It was in Germany. Now, the objective of the declaration at the time was tax evasion and tackling fraud worldwide. Now, the Global Forum, whose stated policy, and I have a quote here, is to make life harder for the terrorist tax dodgers, crooked businessmen, and others whose action undermine a fair society, is what this whole thing is about. How do you get global good governance in financial matters at a time when financial flows from one country to another are so easy? So it mentions here that the trigger for all of this was the announcement by Trinidad and Tobago in 2009, when the People's National Movement government was in power at that time. Mr. Manning was the Prime Minister, and stated their intention to establish an international financial center here. And what Hawaii did on the 14th is that he assured the Global Forum of this country's commitment and gave them a timeline of 2015 for the first exchanges of information in accordance with the new common reporting standard of the Global Forum for Tax Transparency. At that time, he said that continued development of the TTIFC is critically dependent on this country maintaining a positive standing with the Global Forum. So he was doing this in the context of continuity of policy in the sector of finance started by the Manning administration, which we were prepared to continue. And how I also called on the forum to provide special assistance to small island developing states in addressing the constraints which they face in the areas of information technology, human resources, legal frameworks, and the paucity of legislative drafting capability. So there are perhaps three issues that we need to flag. One is that the whole purpose of this is crime fighting, financial crime, terrorism, tax evasion. The second thing, and this is not something that the government has mentioned in their presentation, nor was it discussed from their perspective in the Joint Select Committee, is the development intent behind this. There is a development intent behind this, which is that we are dealing with international finance, global finance, and the financial sector globally, which had a crashing experience in 2008, 2009. And the consequence of all of this, as the criminal element also becomes vital in the financial sector and use the sector for all manner of things, is this global governance system which we are trying to be part of. But we must not forget that while part is crime fighting, the other part of it is developmental. The third thing is that the objective of being part of this is that we want to be part of a community of nations that conducts financial business in an orderly way. And really, we want to be part of this as a country, I'm thinking, because we want to take a very progressive approach of harmonizing our law with international law where it is necessary and where it makes a difference, both to our developmental needs as well as our participation in a very alert and lively and sustainable community of nations in finance. Now, that was 2017, and as my colleagues, the member for Naparima and the member for Jaguanas East pointed out, very little, in fact, occurred between 2015 and 2017 in terms of progress. And I find it very hard to be persuaded by any argument now that we need to hurry, especially because of the fact that by their own admission, the June deadline of 2018 has not, in fact, met, a fact acknowledged in the Joint Select Committee and acknowledged here in the House today. Now, December 2017 came, and 2017 had almost gone. And on December 5th, the Attorney General issued a press release which has been referred to by other members standing here in this honorable House. And I just want to flag maybe one or two things. I do not want to belabor the point, and I do not want to say anything that other people have said before. But I do want to say that one of the things mentioned here on page 2 is that Trinidad and Tobago applied January 24, 2017 to the Global Forum to become a party to the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Assistance on Tax Matters, and that they prepared and laid the Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2017 in the House of Representatives on April 21. And the government requested and obtained from the Global Forum a deferral for implementation of its CRS obligations to September 2018. And then the Attorney General mentions in here, on page 3, the discussions included the Global Forum's urgent recommendations with respect to the need to amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, to provide for the sharing of information under a number of double taxation agreements. And the Trinidad and Tobago consented to such a sharing, and then he mentions the relationship between FACTA and MAC. That's the short name for the multilateral opportunity to be part of this global forum. Now, the bills outlined above, he said, that's the Attorney General in this press release, are expected to be enacted in early 2018. So we've long past that, bringing Trinidad and Tobago into technical compliance, etc.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 55-1B, please, I invite you to take a look at that standing order.
Honorable Member for Carney Central, as you yourself said in your presentation, you didn't want to repeat.
Yes.
And therefore, I think you've made certain points which reflect what others have said, particularly this point about, the delay. So I'd ask you if
About what, ma'am?
About the delay,
yes.
the timelines. Okay, so I'd ask you if you could quickly wrap up that and move on to a fresh point, please.
Yes. One important point made here, though, is that the matter having to do with the sharing of information, of course, had to do with citizens of the EU, not of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a matter which came up here, a matter which was discussed, because I read all the documents related to the Joint Select Committee, including the verbatim notes. And the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago were not meant to be caught up in this net of international exchange. And this is an important point which needs to be addressed. Now, the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Member for Diego Martin Northeast, when he was referring the 3 bills to the Joint Select Committee, he made a statement here, and this statement also indicates clearly that what they were about to do is to meet the requirements of the EU, and that for that purpose, the 3 bills were necessary. So, given all of this, Madam Speaker, given what has been said about the importance of the 3 bills, given the fact that they were sent to the Joint Select Committee to be dealt with, given that the expectation is for compliance, that all 3 bills will have been passed in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, the question I have to ask is the income tax amendment bill on its own sufficient for the task at hand of compliance? And I do not think that to be so.
Madam Speaker, Once again, may I invite you to look at Standing Order 55-1B. Everybody else made the same point.
Okay, so that, again, as I said, member for Caroni Central, I understand you developing a point, and therefore, I think member for Chaguanas East, when he initially spoke, basically that was the crux of and he particularly developed them and then went back to summarize them. It was also dealt with member Naparima. So, again, if you could just wrap up that, I refer the question and go on, as I say, to a fresh perspective on your contribution.
Ma'am, I'm building a case, and it's a legitimate question to ask whether the one bill that they have brought here, of the three that were supposed to be considered together,
Continue,
yes,
please.
whether it is sufficient to meet the compliance requirement. It is a legitimate question. The second thing is that, is the bill in its present form acceptable? For instance, the commingling of Trinidad and Tobago citizens in the law with OECD country citizens, residents, and or business participants, none of which are clearly identified in this bill, Madam Speaker. None. This was a very important issue of contention over the FATCA bill. And one of the reasons to respond to the AG of why that bill was done the way it was precisely to extricate and locate in the bill that the bill was about citizens of the United States, residents of the United States, and people who from wherever had business arrangements or tax liabilities in the United States of America. And this matter of commingling makes the situation nebulous, it makes it unclear, and it raises the whole question of jurisdiction, and that causes, it does not make the differentiations, Madam Speaker, that are necessary in a bill as important as this for the matters that we are talking about that are the consequences of scrutiny in this particular matter. The other thing related to that confusion, that possible confusion, is does the confusion itself offer the opportunity for abuse? When there is clarity, there is less likelihood of abuse. But when there is confusion, the opportunity for misinterpretation or strategic interpretation for some motivated purpose can lead to abuse. Thirdly, if the bill cries out for clarity and still needs work, do we not have a right and a duty to get it right? And also, can we know, and this is a very important point, Madam Speaker, can we know how to get it right unless and until we are clear on what exactly is going to be in the other two bills, so that we can ensure clarity, complementarity, and compatibility of the three bills? And I suspect that that was the consideration when the minister brought it and sent them to the Joint Select Committee. And when Parliament, in its wisdom, referred this to be considered all three together. And you come here now with one bill claiming that it is finished when we do not know what the other two bills are going to be containing, and yet they are absolutely interconnected with one another. Finally, since all three bills were referred to the Joint Select Committee together precisely because of their interrelatedness and interconnectedness. Should the committee not complete its work thoroughly?
Madam Speaker, again, I invite you to look at Standing Order 55-1B.
And member for Caroni Central, again, I think that's where the difficulty is, where I agree that you have made some points a bit differently. I think that there are three underlying points that have been made by the speakers previous to you that were very, very clear. So that in areas where it seems that it's repetitive, even though put over in your own style, I would ask you to move on. And certainly whether this point you're dealing with has been dealt with by the two other speakers on your side.
The reason that they need, Madam Speaker, to be dealt with comprehensively in a full report is because they need to deal with the, first of all, the global forum requirements on the one hand. Remember, I started by saying, you see, she was not in the house to listen, the member for Aruka Maloney.
Okay. One member, I have been here.
I know that.
And I have determined that what you're saying, some of it has been repetitive, okay? So it doesn't matter whether any other member was here, I have been here, all right? One. So that I've asked you to move on from points that weren't repetitive. And again, I really won't want to, invoke 51(1)B. Secondly, your speaking original time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to wind up. And I will caution you, because I've stood up 3 times, I will caution you to really deal in your 15 minutes with the fresh perspective that I know you would like to bring.
Yes, Madam Speaker. You would remember, Madam Speaker, that when I spoke and I used former Minister Larry Hawaii's statement, I talked about the fact that there was not just the issue of compliance with the EU, but the developmental question and other considerations. And I think that when we look at the 3 bills together, in order to design the bills in such a way that they are compatible and complementary, we would be able to deal with more than the issue of global forum compliance and to deal with some of the developmental questions and some of the sensitive questions having to do with us being a sovereign nation capable of thinking for ourselves. Correct. So, because you would remember, Madam Speaker, that I raised the issue of the financial center, which is still being pursued under our administration, it started under the Manning administration, being pursued here as well. Now, in the Joint Select Committee, except for the only self-interested issue that was raised during the discussion was the issue of free zones. That was an issue that was discussed in the Joint Select Committee. And the exposure and vulnerability of our own citizens, if bad or flawed law were to be made here in any form or fashion, were of concern to the members of the opposition, but not treated seriously by the chair or the government side there, which is why I suspect there was a minority report. But those are very important questions. The developmental question on where free zones, how free zones are treated, which will come up in other bills, and that is why the compatibility question of the bills are so important. And secondly, the concern for our own citizens to make sure that in making law to satisfy EU requirements, that is my main point, Madam Speaker, that we do not make law against our own citizens in trying to satisfy EU requirements. So, our position is on this side is that we cannot support this bill. They have got to go and deal with the 3 bills as a joint select committee. Correct. And bring them all 3 here for us to debate. Now, when we were doing the FATCA bill, basically, we ended up in the joint select committee with the government kicking and screaming to get there. Took us nearly 2 years of wasted time. In the end, however, we got a good bill. Correct. We got a legitimate and good bill. At that time, Madam Speaker, you would remember, the bankers' only concern were correspondent banking issues. That was their interest, and they wanted the bill fast. Big businesses' position was they wanted the bill passed fast. They didn't care what in it. They wanted it passed. Because they were concerned that the impact of the removal of interest of the correspondent banks from the banks of Trinidad and Tobago would affect their international business. So they were concerned. And small and medium enterprises were worrying about how all of this would affect their business, especially if they did business at that time with the FATCA with the United States. Now, this bill is about tax. The policy question on taxes has not come up at all. All the focus has been on how do we satisfy EU requirements to get their tax from their citizens, and in the process compromising our citizens in the legislation. But the government has a policy on taxation and on revenue. And even if they cannot articulate what that policy is, I could tell you the elements of it and you will see a policy emerging. High taxes, first of all. Secondly, tax everybody, sometimes willy-nilly.
Member for Caroni Central, yes. My difficulty here is relevance. And unless you could very quickly tie that in to the amendment, we're not dealing with an income tax bill simpliciter. We are dealing with an amendment for a specific purpose. So unless you could tie that very quickly into, I'll ask you again to move on to your next point.
But Madam Speaker, the name of this bill is the Income Tax Amendment Bill. This is about local taxes most of all, you know.
Member, I think at this stage I'll ask you to keep your seat. Next member.
I would like my right.
Member. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You all want a pliant opposition, a pliant. You have nothing from your wife. You have nothing to move on.
To all members, okay? As I've said before, an eye for an eye will make everybody blind. Okay? Minister of Finance.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I honestly don't know why the member for Caroni Central entered the debate, except perhaps to maintain some form of relevance. I'm not sure. But let me deal with points made by the member for Chaguanas East and the member for Naparima. The member for Shogunas East, Madam Speaker, made a number of statements that are just not correct, wrong, inaccurate, false, untrue. The first point made by the member for Shogunas East, the first wrong point, was that the bill is not properly before the House. What is before the House, Madam Speaker, is the report of the Joint Select Committee to consider a report on 3 bills. And this report is properly before the House. It was laid in the last session, and it was carried over into this session, which is why a motion appeared on the order paper to adopt this report. And this is what we are debating today. But that is just a detail. What I found politically, particularly politically dishonest, Madam Speaker, was the statement that we should be dealing with all 3 bills, take it back to a Joint Select Committee and complete the work on all the 3 bills. Why I consider that to be politically dishonest, Madam Speaker, is that on page 3 of the report, the following statements are made. Paragraph 8, your committee engaged in preliminary discussions at its first meeting held on Wednesday, June the 6th, 2018, and looked at the purpose of each bill referred to the committee and the requirements for Trinidad and Tobago to become compliant with the international standard on exchange of information on request, as indicated by the Global Forum. That's para 8. But the telling paragraph is para 9, which will reveal the political dishonesty. Your committee was cognizant of the imminent prorogation of the 3rd session of the 11th Parliament. And at its second meeting, and the word second meeting is in bold, on Tuesday, August 21st, agreed to the following in an effort to advance the work of the committee, keeping in mind its immediate international obligations. This was an agreement of the committee, Madam Speaker, that 1, the committee would consider and report on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 by September 14, 2018, during the 3rd session, and 2, the committee would defer consideration of the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 and the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018. So in the second meeting, they would never read those parts of this report because they want to mislead people. They want to confuse people. I had to sit here, Madam Speaker, and listen to all of these members not deal with a single clause in the bill.
Not a suggestion from me.
Not a single amendment. This bill was here since May of 2018, Madam Speaker.
In the Joint Select Committee.
No, it's in the parliamentary system since May 2018.
6 months ago.
June, July, August, September, October, into November. Almost 6 months. And they have not proposed a single amendment to the bill, Madam Speaker. But in this committee meeting, we agreed, the committee agreed, and there's nothing in the minority report that objects to that statement, that we would consider and report on the Income Tax Amendment Bill and defer consideration of the other 2 bills, Madam Speaker. It's here in black and white. It is politically dishonest to pretend otherwise. And when you go now to page 5, para 15, your committee wishes to report that it was severely constrained due to parliamentary recess and scheduling conflicts. Consequently, the committee was unable to convene meetings until August 2018. The member for Naparima read part of that paragraph. Not the whole thing, you know. Part of that paragraph. And then chose not to read para 16, which reads as follows. As a result, the committee, everybody, took a decision to focus on consideration of the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. So it's here in black and white, Madam Speaker, in the committee report that the committee agreed it would focus on this bill, report to the House with this bill, and defer the consideration of the other two bills for another time. And that is why when you come to the recommendations, it says, this is the bill that we are proposing for the House to consider and pass, and that on resumption of the proceedings in the next session, that a committee be appointed to continue work on the other two bills, Madam Speaker. It's all here in black and white. We all sat in a room and we agreed that we would focus on this bill, bring this bill to the Parliament, get it through the Parliament, and that we would appoint another committee to deal with the other two bills. But I was had to sit down here since 2 o'clock and hear this pretense, this political pretense. Righteous indignation. Pious sanctimonious behavior, Madam Speaker. Oh, let's put it all back in a committee. This report shouldn't be here. This bill shouldn't be here. Now, the hard part about all of this, Madam Speaker, 10 clauses in the bill. 10. 5 of them are purely administrative in terms of the title, the interpretation, and so on. So we're dealing with a bill that has 5 operative clauses, Madam Speaker. And as the Attorney General is pointing out to me, 3 of them are a reproduction of what has already been debated at length in this Parliament and agreed to by the members opposite from the FATCA legislation. So we're down to 2 clauses. And you're going to tell me in 6 months, you can't look at 2 clauses and come up with an amendment, Madam Speaker, in 6 months. And in the minority report bears no resemblance whatsoever to the false allegations made by the member for Shogunas Isu. Should be ashamed of himself. There's no reference in the minority report from the opposition for consultation. Not a word, not a semicolon, not a full stop. Not a capital C. There's no reference whatsoever to the need for consultation in the minority report. What the minority report refers to is some concerns as to whether this legislation is required and whether we should have judicial oversight. That is it. All of these things that the member is claiming are relevant, he made them up today. It's not in the minority report, Madam Speaker. Not there. Not there. And a set of noise about how we should go to the EU, the CARICOM team, and defer everything until that CARICOM team meets with the EU. But there was a newspaper report, Madam Speaker, and I know they read the papers, you know. There was a newspaper report that the EU refused to meet with the group of CARICOM ministers with respect to this legislation. Refused. So the meeting was cancelled indefinitely. Indefinitely. So to make a demand, as the member for Shogunas East made today, that we do nothing until the Minister of Finance or a suitable person from the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago attends a meeting together with a CARICOM team and meets with the EU and the Global Forum to deal with this matter, that we should defer everything until we have that meeting. Pie in the sky. There is no meeting. There will be no meeting, Madam Speaker. And they know. And what they are therefore doing is stonewalling. They're filibustering. And that is how I could describe the entire contribution of the member for Caroni Central. Stonewalling and filibustering. All he did was repeat what the other said. But nothing of substance. Nothing of substance. If the problem is, and the other thing is, members must listen. I can't believe people would sit down there and not listen. The member for Caroni Central complaining that this bill deals with 2 different things. I said that in my introduction, that this bill is designed to deal with our FATF requirements, which are coming up this month, FATF requirements, dealing with proceeds of crime. Why it is, whenever we come to this parliament to deal with issues relating to the proceeds of crime, the members over there get jittery. Why do they get jittery and jittery? What's the problem? Every time we bring legislation to deal with tightening up on catching criminals, white-collar criminals, assets that have been hidden away, dealing with the proceeds of crime, we get stonewalling, obfuscation, filibustering, lack of cooperation. Why is it? It's very curious, Madam Speaker. But I made the point in my introduction. This bill has two purposes. One is to allow automatic sharing of tax information. The principles are so simple. The way they talk as if it's complex, it's not complex. It's simple. In the FATCA legislation, we agreed there would be automatic sharing of tax information between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States Tax Authority with respect to citizens of the United States or residents doing business in Trinidad and Tobago and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago doing business in the United States. There would be a mutual sharing of information. And that is a global requirement. You could run, but you can't get away from that. The whole world is going that way. If the tax authority in Trinidad and Tobago, the Inland Revenue Division, does not get to the point where there's automatic sharing of tax information with respect to citizens of other countries, or there is information with respect to citizens of our country doing business in those countries, we are going to be de-risked, delisted, blacklisted. You could put it any way you want. We are going to become a pariah state. We shall become...
Tell the public what Naprimo just said.
No problem.
He said they have no problem.
The crosstalk, I am having difficulty in hearing the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I'm being told that the member for Naparima said he has no problem with the country being blacklisted, delisted, and so on, Madam Speaker.
What you're objecting to this? That is dishonest.
You didn't say that. What is dishonest? You didn't say that.
Madam Speaker.
You are relative. You didn't say that. You don't listen.
Madam Speaker.
Really lie with a straight face.
When we debate...
Copy, boy.
Citizens of the EU information going to the
Members, honorable members, honorable members, I think I've ruled repeatedly that the word lie, liars, in terms of reference to members in this respectable chamber, those two words are unparliamentary. And again, I would remind members, as we are here, where we started. Sometimes when we engage in too much excessive banter, it could lead us to places that we'd rather not be. So I'd like us all to hold that in our memory for the continuation of today's proceedings. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me repeat. When I introduced this bill, this report, I made it clear this bill serves two purposes. The first one is to allow the automatic sharing of tax information with other countries, with the tax authorities in other countries. We did that for the United States with the FATCA legislation. And the way the world has gone, Madam Speaker, the world has changed. The world has changed. No longer can it be discretionary. This is what has been in our laws for many, many years, that our tax authority had the discretion, it had the option to decide whether it would share tax information or not with other tax authorities in other countries. That done. What every country in the world wants now is automatic sharing of tax information. And that is what FATCA was all about.
And they signed on to it.
And FATCA, the FATCA bill now provides, and it's been happening since we passed the legislation, the guidelines were issued by the central bank and so on, and the banks have been doing their due diligence and gathering the information, passing them on to the Inland Revenue Division, who is automatically transmitting the tax information now to the tax authority in the United States. It's happened. And all we are doing here is we are seeking to comply with a requirement from the rest of the world,
Which they agreed to.
which honorable members opposite have agreed to,
Writing.
that we would share tax information automatically with the OECD countries that make up the global forum. Yes, as the AG is reminding me, the UNC cabinet agreed that it would do what was required to have automatic sharing of tax information with the OECD countries. UNC cabinet agreed to that. And all this bill is seeking to do is to achieve that, exactly what we did with FATCA, using the same terminology, the same words, the same clauses, the same principles of law, the same legislative drafting. There's nothing new inside of here with respect to the sharing of tax information. And that does not need to go back to a committee. We have beaten that to death in committee, the sharing of tax information. We as a parliament have agreed what the word should be in these clauses with respect to sharing of tax information, what the principles are, what the safeguards are, what the protection is for our citizens. We've agreed to that. We've already settled that. That was settled over a year ago. And this bill simply reproduces what we agreed to for FATCA in terms of information sharing with the rest of the world. The other part of the bill deals with our Financial Action Task Force obligations as a member of CFATF and FATF with respect to the proceeds of crime and terrorist financing. And the only point made in the minority report is that before a police officer is given access to tax information for the purpose of dealing with the proceeds of crime, because I do wish members opposite had read the bill, because the question of the police officer getting the information is specific to the Proceeds of Crime Act and the terrorist financing legislation. That's what it's for. It's there in black and white. And if honorable members opposite have a concern, as indicated in the minority report, that the problem is that you don't want to give a police officer that sort of flexibility and freedom and authority and power over our citizens. You don't want to allow a police officer to just do that just so, even though it's a superintendent or above, and that you want judicial oversight. We have no problem with that. We have no problem with that. If you want to subject the actions of the police officer who is trying to get tax information to deal with a proceeds of crime matter, judicial oversight, no problem. And if you had taken 5 minutes and drafted an amendment to that particular clause or clauses that were bothering you and put in some form of judicial oversight, then we could have had a meaningful parliamentary session today. But instead we were treated with grandstanding, playing to the gallery, stonewalling, filibustering, misinformation, bad information. It's just bad. The contributions from members opposite are just bad. They don't deal with the issues. They don't deal with the issues. And Madam Speaker, members opposite could jump high and jump low. If you feel that we could sit down here in Trinidad and Tobago and ignore the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, which we have been part of, how long in that system?
1998.
1998.
Headquarters in Trinidad.
Under the UNC, under the Pandey administration, we have been part of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. You're talking 20 years. We have been part of the FATF system. If you think we in Trinidad and Tobago having signed up to the Caribbean FATF and the Global FATF for so many years, and have been involved in so many meetings and so many forums and made so many presentations, and have had so many reviews and have been subject to so much analysis, and we have been told this government, the UNC government that preceded us, and governments before that, that we have to do certain things to become compliant with FATF requirements. Otherwise, we will be blacklisted and de-risked. If you think we could sit down here and just play the fool and say we are a sovereign country and we're not going to do what they say and we're not going to amend our laws, you have another thing coming that is just simply childish. It's childish for members opposite to think. It is childish for members opposite to think that we can ignore FATF requirements, as the Attorney General keeps reminding me, agreed to by your cabinet. Because FATF knows what your cabinet agreed to. So if you think you could just sit down there and say we are a sovereign country, and we don't care what FATF had to say, and we don't care what the European Union have to say, and we don't care what Global Forum have to say, we big and bad here in Trinidad and Tobago, that is a childish approach to legislation, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, what I think we need to do now is we need to go to the clauses in the bill, because there are only 5 operative clauses, Madam Speaker. Only 5. The first 5, I can't imagine that members opposite could have any objection to the clauses dealing with the title and the interpretation section and so on, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. The ayes have it. The report is...
Mrs. Regis? Aye. Dr. Rowley?
Simone. Members understand we have provisions in the standing orders that every member is free to properly invoke. Okay? And let's respect that. Continue, Clerk.
Sorry, Sifa, 1918.
Mr. Al-Rawi?
Aye.
Mr. Imbert?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Dial Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Aye.
Ms. Cudjoe? Aye. Mrs. Critchlow-Coburn? Aye. Mr. Dillon?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster Roy? Aye. Dr. Gatsby Dolly?
Aye.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Dr. Francis?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Antwine?
Yes.
Mr. Leons?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Charles?
No.
Dr. Rambachan?
No.
Mr. Karim?
No.
Dr. Tewarie?
No.
Dr. Munilal?
No.
Mrs. Nuala Hussain?
No.
Dr. Gopi Singh?
No.
Mrs. Gayadeen Gopi Singh?
No.
Mr. Indar Singh?
No.
Dr. Bodo?
No.
Mr. Parry?
No.
Mr. Singh?
No.
votes for, 13 votes against, 0 abstentions.
Honorable members, on a division, 20 votes for, 13 votes against, no abstention. The report is therefore adopted. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 66-4, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act be forthwith read a second time.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act be forthwith read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. Division.
Demonstrate your contempt for the comment.
Mrs. Robinson-Regis.
Aye.
Dr. Rowley.
Aye.
Mr. Alrawi.
Aye.
Mr. Imbert.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Dial Singh.
Yes.
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Aye.
Ms. Kajo.
Yes.
Mrs. Critchlow Coburn.
Aye.
Mr. Dillon.
Aye.
Mrs. Webster Roy.
Aye.
Dr. Gatsby Dolly.
Aye.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Dr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Oliver.
Yes.
Mr. Antoine.
Yes.
Mr. Leons.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Coffey.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Charles.
No.
Dr. Rambachan.
No.
Mr. Karim.
No.
Could the vote be taken in silence, please?
Dr. Tewarie.
No.
Dr. Munilal.
No.
Mrs. Nuala Hossain.
No.
Dr. Gopi Singh.
No.
Mrs. Gayadeen Gopi Singh.
No.
Mr. Indar Singh.
No.
Dr. Bodo.
No.
Mr. Parry.
No.
Mr. Singh.
No.
Results of division as follows: 20 votes for, 13 votes against, 0 abstention.
Honorable members, with a division, 20 members voted for, 13 members voted against, no abstentions. Therefore, the motion is carried for the bill to be read a second time. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act.
Member for Diego Martin, Northeast.
As provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 be committed to a committee of the whole.
Honorable members, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 be committed to the committee of the whole. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. The ayes have it. The House will now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill. Close. I close.
You want me to come now?
Is it agreed that we're taking this clause by clause?
Clause 1.
The question is that clause 1 stand part of the bill.
Madam Speaker, may I elucidate? Clause 1 is simply the short title of the bill. It is not substantive.
The question is that clause 1 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 1 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 2.
The question is that clause 2 stand part of the bill. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clause 2 is the standard clause where an act is inconsistent with the Constitution.
The question is that clause 2 stand part of the bill. Question is that clause 2 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 2 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 3.
The question is that clause 3 stand part of the bill. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clause 3 is a very simple interpretation clause which says in this act, the act means the Income Tax Act. That's all clause 3 is.
The question is that clause 3 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 3 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 4.
The question is that clause 4 stand part of the bill. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Clause 4 is again very simple, not substantive. All it does is amend the long title to make it clear that the Income Tax Act will now provide for the sharing of information with other entities under international sharing arrangements.
The question is that clause 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 4 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. Member for Diego Martin Northeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clause 5 is the first substantive clause, and this is the clause that amends Section 4 of the Income Tax Act to give an exception to the general secrecy provisions contained in Section 4 of the Act, which are the cause of all the issues we're having with the Global Forum, the EU, and so on. And what Clause 5 does is provides for the sharing of information by the Board of Inland Revenue with other authorities, and also sharing of information to the Financial Intelligence Unit, and also the sharing of tax information with a member of the police service of the rank of superintendent or above, when that person is investigating whether an offense has been committed under the Proceeds of Crime and the Anti-Terrorism Act. I would ask the opposition at this time, Madam Speaker, do you have any amendments to Clause 5 of the bill, since this is the first substantive clause and the clause that treats with giving of information to a police officer? You have no amendments? What does not at this time mean? No, this is a simple thing with 5
Just
clauses.
proceed, please.
No. Does the opposition have any amendments? Proceed with what? No, Madam Speaker.
May we have some order, please?
Madam Speaker, this is a very important point. The members of the opposition made a lot of heavy weather about this clause. We would like to know what their amendments are.
Madam Chair, if I may be permitted. Clause 5 of the bill, the first part, it causes a deletion to subsection 2A. It's that section which allowed a backdoor for the President of the Republic to give exceptions for secrecy. And therefore, in tightening up the law, we're removing that the President may, by order, allow for a breach of secrecy. In receiving the minority report of the opposition, they made specific reference simply to Clause 5, which deals with A6. It's on page 2 of the bill. At that clause, it is provided that, notwithstanding the secrecy provisions in 1 and 2, a person having an official duty or being employed in the administration of the Act shall, for the purposes of subsection 5, provide information to the FIU in subclause A, and then provide taxpayer information to the TTPS to persons above the specific rank of superintendent, etc. And it allows for that to be done in circumstances of investigation of criminal matters specifically, or where in an earlier subsection there's actual criminal proceedings. The minority report specifically made reference to the laws of South Africa, and the honorable members opposite indicated in the course of the debate on the report that they had concerns about this. We are specifically now reiterating statements made during the debate on the report that we are minded to listen to that observation of members opposite, and we would like to put onto the record now that we are minded to listen to this. This is the only substantive issue raised in the minority report. The other points raised in the minority report were wait for CARICOM meeting. We've said as a matter of public record that there is no CARICOM meeting. There was a request and it didn't happen. The only other point in the minority report concerned this, and the members provided an example of South African law. In the South African 2011 legislation that they provided, it contained in the draft that they provided is a blanket exception for the FIU. So if that is what they provided in writing to the committee, we're very fine with that, because it means that our law at subclause 6, paragraph A, is in exact pari materia with the South African 2011 law. That leaves, therefore, only 6B, the question of whether there ought to be a judicial supervision of the police receiving information. That was the only point in the minority report. So I'm asking now specifically, as the person charged with assisting in the drafting of the law, could the members of the opposition tell us now what their submission on the back of their written minority report, with this bill having sat for 6 months in the Parliament, what their position is?
Member for Old Bush East.
Madam Speaker, just for the record, the opposition members have spoken in this debate on a motion, not the minority report today.
What?
But there was a debate on the motion earlier. The opposition members indicated that our position is very clear, that this bill should be sent to a joint select committee or resent, along with the other bills, to work out all the details and settle all the issues. We will not be ambushed at this time into making any decision and to arrive at any conclusions based on this committee work, and we will ask the government to please proceed as they see fit. Thank you.
Member for Old Bush, as a man of words, I wonder if ambush is the word you really wanted.
I withdraw that word and will use a lighter word, but we're not prepared at this moment to entertain the government.
Madam
Okay,
Speaker.
yeah, may I just ask one thing for some clarification before you speak, Member for Diego Martin West? Some amendments were circulated. Are they incorporated? All right, okay.
We're not going to them yet.
All right, yes, okay. Member for Diego Martin West.
Madam Speaker, I am trying to understand what is being said to the government. The opposition is saying to the government that they're not ready or not willing, but Madam Speaker, I'm sure you would have heard the member for Diego Martin Northeast, the Minister of Finance, indicate quite clearly that the position of the opposition that this bill be separated from the other two was a decision of the committee. That's one. The second thing, Madam Speaker, is that I heard Orapooch East saying that the debate that took place today did not involve the minority report. My understanding was that the proceedings before the House was the work of the committee, where there was a majority report accompanied by a minority report. So I don't know where the minority report became separated from the committee's work. I think, Madam Speaker, it is quite disingenuous and in fact frightening that after we finished the debate today, where two reports debated, that we could be hearing from Orapooch East that the opposition did not respond to their own minority report in the debate. Madam Speaker, this is the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. If members of Parliament are prepared to play fast and loose with that kind of conversation, putting on the record that the debate of the Parliament was in fact a fallacy and a fraud, I am asking you, Madam Speaker, to take into account what is being put on the record. And as leader of the government, I am rejecting out of hand that the government today separated the two reports into two pieces, and all that the proceedings today dealt with was the majority report. That is not correct, Madam Speaker. What was dealt with was the work of the committee as put before, and the request to the House was to accept the report of the majority, and that's what's before the House.
Madam Chair, I just want to expand a little bit on what the Prime Minister just said. The Prime Minister went into the report or the GSC, and when you look at the report coming out of the GSC, especially the last ending of the last third meeting, it gave a clear indication that that was not going to be the final meeting. It talked about, the chairman on that committee talked about sending a report out round robin for consideration. He even talked about that he was not, and I use his words, he's not bullying anybody in any report. So that the committee, or my members, never thought that that committee was going to end. So that is where we sent in our minority report. So for the Prime Minister now come to raise an issue here, our members, we felt if they have brought certain things here this afternoon, Madam Speaker, let them continue their business, because we felt that the GSC has not completed their work, and we stand by that.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I thank you. I just want to make very, very clear that my understanding of the operationality of a Joint Select Committee is that a few hand-picked members from both houses of Parliament have the opportunity to do certain work, return it to a full committee of the House, and a Joint Select Committee is at best a microscope approach of the whole of the committee of the House. We are sitting here now comprising all members of the lower House of Representatives in a committee of the whole at the second reading having passed. And Madam Speaker, I dare say, if we take the work from the committee that came to us, the minority report, which by the way is part of the report is the majority and the minority, and we debated the report. What is before us now as a country is 5 more clauses. We are at one of them now. The other 4 are replications of the FATCA bill which we did. Therefore, there can be very little to be said about that, because they cut and paste the law and philosophy behind what we agreed to already in the FATCA bills. So we have one clause. This clause number 5, I am asking specifically now, with the responsibility for drafting legislation, what is the opposition's contribution on their own submission Because their submission from the Minority Report is FIU, we want South Africa. South Africa has unfettered access for FIU. It's to be found in the draft that they submitted. The second point is therefore the only point left. The question is, are they advancing now a written submission circulated or an oral submission now with respect to judicial supervision for the TTPS having access to taxpaying information? That is the only issue on the floor and in the bill. And I'm asking specifically now to the opposition if they will guide us and the country who's paying attention on this issue as to the answers to that.
Madam Chair, I just want to add, in the GSC, one of the conditions the chairman had put forward to the members is that this bill, with the amendments, would have gotten us off the blacklist. He said he had confirmation from the Global Forum of this matter, and the committee was waiting. It is here in the Hansard, in the verbatim. They were waiting on that confirmation that this bill with the amendments were going to take us off the blacklist. To date, the chairman has not produced that piece of information, so that is why we are saying, if you continue with your work.
Madam Chair, may I answer? First of all, this bill is not Global Forum alone. This is the FATF obligations. We have the FATF report, and the FATF report says that we are to treat with removing the secrecy provisions. The timeline for that is that we must do it in the month of November. That report has been laid on umpteen occasions, including in the miscellaneous provisions bills and other reports where we have dealt with that. That's the first point. Secondly, the Global Forum, I can confirm, sat with the government's drafting team, Ministry of Finance, Attorney General's office. They provided their written comments by way of balloon items, which have been circulated to all members so they can see the comments themselves. It's in their hands right now. And they sent their representatives, the Global Forum, to Trinidad and Tobago. If I'm not mistaken, they asked to meet with the opposition, and the opposition refused to meet with the members of the Global Forum. So, Madam Speaker, I want to put onto the record, this is the information that I have. I have attended the Global Forum meetings here in Trinidad and Tobago. I have attended the drafting meetings. The government specifically asked the Global Forum to ensure that it reached out to the opposition, and the opposition refused to meet with the Global Forum team. So, Madam Speaker, we are now at the point of reality. We have the FATF obligations before us now. The Minister of Finance has provided all of the communications with the Global Forum in the context that we have had them, and we're asking, and this is the fourth time I'm asking now, the fourth time, what is the position with respect to the access by the TTPS and the need for judicial supervision? 4 times.
Madam Chair, I listened to the Attorney General. I'm in amazement. I met with a team. I headed that team on February 22, 2018. I met with the Global Forum team. I will call out the names. Mr. Godfrey, just now.
1 minute, please. I cannot hear a point up here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there is a whole choir.
Madam Chair, I met with the Global Forum team, myself, Senator Haynes, and Senator Obika, in this Parliament chamber on the 6th floor on February 23rd at 2018 at 4:30 p.m. The team was headed by one Mr. Godfrey, who is the Deputy Head of Global Forum Secretariat, and Ms. Kaylin Onusko, the Tax Policy Analyst at the Global Forum. And I was supposed to speak this evening, but I want to say when we met with them, they were promised on February 23rd by this government that this Parliament, the bills would have been laid in March of 2018. I have them on record, a voice recording of that meeting. Madam Chair. Madam Chair, and what they said to us as the opposition, they were waiting on 3 pieces of legislation to take us off the blacklist: beneficial ownership, double taxation treaties, and automatic exchange of information. And all 3 were interrelated, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I don't know if the Attorney General knows what he's talking about.
Madam Chair, I'm compelled to answer. There were several meetings with the Global Forum.
Madam Chair, when they met with me...
I didn't interrupt you, you know. I didn't interrupt you.
Order, please. Order, please.
No, the AG has the
Member for
floor.
Point of Appeal, when you were speaking...
Don't be so rude.
I even asked your side to keep quiet so I can hear. Okay? So if you can just hold the point, I'll take you after the member for San Fernando West, whom I've recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the Global Forum has had several meetings. The last meeting that I'm referring to, I was told that the opposition refused to meet with them. I'm warmed and very happy, and I'll accept my learned friend's position that he and 2 senators met with the Global Forum in February. I'm very pleased to hear that. Because if the undertaking that he has referred to in some taped conversation, which I find alarming, but if that is in fact the case, and I won't go into that just yet, then it means that the opposition ought to be able today to speak to the one narrow issue, which I'm now going to ask for the 5th time. There's one issue on the table, which is judicial supervision, according to them, of the TTPS receiving information. There's one issue. The statement by the Honourable Member for Point of Appeal was that the Global Forum said something would be laid in March, and in fact it was laid in May. Okay, March, April, May, 2 months. Maybe 1 month, depending upon where the dates were. Sure, let me even assume that that is true and say mea culpa, because it's irrelevant. The point is, even if that's true, and I don't accept what my friend is saying, but even if it is true, it was laid, the bill is here in May, we are 6 months later. And I would like my friend, Point of Appeal, the Chief Whip, to answer the direct question to him now. This is the 6th time, what is the position on the judicial supervision of the TTPS from their own hands?
And before that, Madam Speaker, just let me say one thing more. It's been asked over and over, why did the committee agree to separate out this bill? The reason is the Global Forum has told us categorically they will not allow us to proceed to the next stage of assessment until we pass this bill.
Correct.
They will not even entertain a request from Trinidad and Tobago to sign the treaty with respect to mutual assistance in taxation matters. They have refused our application on the grounds that we have not passed this amendment to the income tax bill. If we don't pass this, we are dead in the water. We can't go anywhere. The other 2 bills are irrelevant. The other 2 bills depend on this bill. If we don't pass this, we can't even get to the other 2 bills. They won't even allow us to sign the treaty on mutual assistance in taxation matters. They won't allow us to sign double taxation treaties with the OECD countries until we get rid of this offensive provision in our income tax
Ask him to answer the question.
So I am asking members opposite, how much time do you need to deal with this one point about judicial oversight of a police officer with respect to tax information?
Madam Speaker.
Member for please.
In fact, Madam Speaker, I would
just 1 minute. I'm recognizing member for
I would like to give members opposite 2 weeks.
Member for
Madam Speaker, could I indicate to the member, please, that it is with a heavy heart, I want to tell the member for Diego Martin Northeast that the opposition is not in a position to accept your word, given the history of this matter. Madam Speaker, could I
am giving the opposition 2 weeks
it is
to look
not
at
a question
one
of giving,
clause.
but you could give 2 years. That is not the issue. The issue is...
I am standing. Okay? We are going to proceed in a particular manner that would allow this process to be productive. I'm not going to allow people shouting across the floor.
Madam Speaker, am I still
I
at
am
your...
recognizing the member for Orupuchis.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you so much. I would repeat, Madam Speaker, calmly, the position of the opposition as indicated earlier in the debate in this House on this motion, the motion preceding it, was that the bill, along with the other bills, be resent to a joint select committee to work out all the issues and all the challenges together as was promised. In the absence of that initiative by the government, we kindly invite the government, and I'm saying it for the second time, I really don't want to repeat again, please proceed as you see fit. We are in a committee, proceed please. It is not a question, before I end, Madam Speaker, it is not a question of 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, 1 month. Please proceed. You are in a committee. You are going clause by clause. I invite you to proceed.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, it is clear that the opposition has a position which they are not prepared to share with the rest of the House. The one thing that the government knows is that we have to get this done by the end of November. Those who will use their vote in this House to get it done. It's not optional as to when we get it done. So we do have some time. And that time is the end of November, right? Yes. So the request from the opposition on the grounds that they need time to take a position on the clause. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, we will proceed to give the opposition time within the deadline. With it, I know what you asked for, Madam Speaker. I'm just saying, Madam Speaker, the government will give the opposition as much time as is feasible within the fact that this matter ought to be dispensed with by this House by the end of this month. So whatever time they need has to be taken within the context of the deadline of November 30th. And having said that, Madam Speaker, I expect that the Minister of Finance will communicate with the opposition in writing, and we expect to get a response in writing. And having said that, Madam Speaker, I now turn it over to the Leader of the House to take the adjournment.
I would ask the Minister of Finance to therefore report the progress of the committee to the House.
Okay.
Right, so.
Until the report, we haven't completed our work.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I wish to report that the income tax, that clauses 1 to 4 of the income tax amendment bill 2018 were considered in the committee of the whole.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Friday, the 9th day of November at 10 a.m., at which time we will do committee business motion number 2.
Honorable members, there is one matter that qualifies to be raised on the motion for the adjournment. I now call upon the member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful for your leave to raise this matter on the adjournment on the catastrophic national flooding disaster that hit Trinidad and Tobago from 19 October and which impacted on over 120,000 persons. Madam Speaker, the matter on the adjournment is entitled, "The Failure of Governmental Agency, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, to appropriately respond to the flooding that took place in the Caroni River Basin on Friday, October 19, 2018 and onwards." Madam Speaker, the Caroni River Basin, which mirrors the length and follows the Caroni River, starts in the northern range in the Valencia area and proceeds for about 40 kilometers, approximately 25 miles, and then enters into the Caroni swamp and into the Gulf of Paria. And all the areas within that, that river, following that riverine area, Madam Speaker, including some 12 rivers in the northern reach flowing into the Caroni River system, impacts upon they drain approximately 22% of the area of Trinidad. So this is a very important river basin. And so that Greenvale, Chalparo, San Rafael, Brazil, Las Lomas 1, 2, and 3, El Carmen, St. Helena, Kelly, Madras Road, and then you move into Warrenville, Warren, Biocal, Caroni, Hallam, Lapai, and Frederick Settlement were all impacted upon. There has been a significant fixation by the government on Greenvale. In fact, today they held a press conference, but Greenvale is some 650 families. But you have over 30,000 people other than Greenvale impacted upon negatively by this flood. Madam Speaker, the ODPM in the newspaper says of Sunday, October 21st, ODPM under fire again. What is this ODPM, Madam Speaker? This ODPM, this Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, ODPM, was officially established by Cabinet in 2005. It is a Cabinet-created entity. It differs from its predecessor, the National Emergency Management Agency, in that it is a coordinating and managing body that places equal emphasis on all phases of the disaster management cycle: prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And so, Madam Speaker, this by its own article, the ODPM goes on to state, this National Disaster Management Office is responsible for public education and community outreach activities, coordinating national mitigation and capacity building efforts to safeguard property and life by working with other government agencies and first responders in protecting public health and safety, restoring essential government services and critical infrastructure, and providing emergency relief to those severely affected by hazard impact. This means that the ODPM's role as a coordinator and manager of crises and emergencies comes into play through mobilizing key players and resources in order to utilize the best approach to reducing loss of life and damage to property. Some of the ODPM's major players include the first responder agencies, fire services, the municipal corporations, the Ministry of Works and Transport, the emergency medical services. The first responders, these first responders are the people who will be seen on the ground after a hazard impact. Madam Speaker, What was the reality? Is that the ODPM was nowhere to be seen during this crisis. Absolutely nowhere. The ODPM and its first responders were non-existent in the constituency that I was in.
Mine too.
In fact, and my colleague, the member for Caroni, shares that view. I will tell you, Madam Speaker, the fire services came on Sunday. The police came on Monday. The Coast Guard came on Sunday. So what you talk about first responders? They were non-existent. Non-existent, Madam Speaker. My colleague and I, the member for Couva South, who lives in the constituency of Chaguanas West, we were out there Friday night. And we called two ministers, Ministers Kazim Hussain and Rohan Sinanan, requesting a pump to do pumping out of the Caroni village, and they responded. Madam Speaker, I want to tell you, they responded, and we got a pump, and that provided for the lowering of the water levels in that area. From Friday night, where was ODPM? The first responders, they were in Greenvale, all in Greenvale, obviously. They were all there. So that when that disaster is put in place, and you lack capacity, then you have to bring other resources. They put all the resources in that area, but you neglected over 30,000 people in the process. Madam Speaker, what is happening here? ODPM under fire again. It seems that this institution, it is no longer response-centric. It deals with management. It is coordinate the first responders. It is not working. It is a dud. And it is a systemic and institutional failure. Whether you fired George Robinson, as was done in 2010, or Dave Williams resigned in 2017, or you fire back George Robinson again, this time from SSA, the fact of the matter is that it is systemically and institutionally inappropriate for this society, Madam Speaker. So what I am saying to this government, you have community response. I will tell you, Madam Speaker, in the community of Chaguanas West, which we had to lead this exercise, we had community responders headed by Rudy Indar Singh, Member of Parliament for Couva North in Caroni. Couva South in Caroni, he lives in that area. He headed a team. You had Nadira and a team with Randy and others in Warren Monroe. You had Ramona Ramdial, part of that team. She's also a constituent, Couva North. You had, Madam Speaker, Neil Bala and the Bala family with Rodney Rampersad in Harlem. You had Mr. Indal Singh responding in Lapai. So you had community responders, because they fill the gap left by the so-called first responders. Fill the gap. The people fill the gap, Madam Speaker. The people fill the gap. And what do you have? What do you have in this situation, Madam Speaker? And I want to say that in addition to Ministers Kazim Hussain and Rohan Sinanan, Minister Paula Gopiskun called me on the Saturday whilst I was in Harlem. And she provided a truckload of material in collaboration with the TTMA, which we distributed to all the community. And I want to thank Minister Paula Gopiskun and the TTMA for their action in that area. Similarly, Madam Speaker, the Honorable Member for Lopino Bonnier West called me and made her staff available to check and assess and bring about compensation to the flood victims. And I want to thank her for her proactive approach also. We have a very collaborative approach. But Madam Speaker, the first responders, the Tunapuna Piako Regional Corporation and the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, they were non-existent. The disaster management units of those corporations, they were non-existent. Leacock When I called Leacock, the chairman phone, it was filled. Not answering. No answer at all. Madam Speaker, the disaster management unit in the corporation is another failed institutional mechanism. In fact, those members in the and you have disaster management units in 14 corporations. All they do, Madam Speaker, is they hand out hampers and pampers. And they take out selfies. And that is what you have, disaster response. And I want to thank the Honorable Minister of Health for also responding in the area. Madam Speaker, the Penal Debe Corporation responded for over a week in cleaning up my area. The Princestown Corporation also responded. The San Fernando Corporation also responded. There was no response from Chaguanas. Absolutely no response from Chaguanas. Yes, I know, because all they're interested in is handing out hampers and pampers. Madam Speaker, so this is what you have. This is what you have in a situation of disaster management. The model...
The speaking time is now spent. Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to start by speaking to the national community and telling them what was experienced in certain areas of Trinidad and Tobago on the 19th of October. Let's start by picturing that in a very small space of time, on the 19th of October, over 20% of monthly rainfall that is expected, so that is rainfall that could be expected over a period of a month, add 20%, fell in the space of 2 days in certain areas of Trinidad and Tobago. No matter what was done, it would not have been able to prevent the flooding disaster that took place during this period of time. The second thing I'd like to say is, contrary to what my friend from Chaguanas West has just said, the ODPM did not fail. In fact, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the men and women in the ODPM who worked tirelessly for over the space of a week, day in, day out, over the night, to ensure that they could do all that they could with their limited resources. Could a better job have been done with more equipment, more personnel? Absolutely. Next week we will be starting the post-briefing and looking at everything to decide what measures could be fixed. Third thing I'd like to say, first responders, as my friend was partially acknowledging, in these circumstances, the first responders are the DMUs of the regional corporations. And I'm glad that he's honest enough to say that a UNC-controlled corporation of Chaguanas refused to assist the MPs in areas. One thing I'd like to congratulate all on this side for, and I'd like to congratulate the ODPM, the Defense Force, the Police Service, Fire Service, the Coast Guard arm, and all other arms, and the volunteers in Trinidad and Tobago for not playing politics in assisting those in need. At no point in time, and the head of the ODPM, the acting head, was with me for the vast majority of the week as we went up and down the country doing the necessary assessments to decide where resources should be deployed. And I applaud them for that. Could there have been more personnel to accept calls? Absolutely. We're putting that in place. Do we need more equipment, boats, etc.? Yes. Did this type of disaster flooding ever take place in the last few decades of Trinidad and Tobago? The answer is no. Immediately upon it becoming apparent, we started to deploy the boats and vessels to where it was needed to be. What did we do? We then gathered the resources and we distributed them to the regional corporations, because anybody involved in politics in Trinidad and Tobago would know that it is the regional corporations who are best placed to know every street, every lane, and everywhere that is flooding and being affected by flooding in Trinidad and Tobago, and they were in Trinidad, and where to deploy the necessary resources. And I'll use this opportunity to say that when I went down to Mafi King, down in Mayaro, and I was there to assess and see what was going on a street, where there was massive flooding taking place. Everybody was happy. They were saying, look, let us rally. They were doing it, and I was seeing there was no race, no creed, no religion at play. Indians, blacks, the Chinese, everybody was out doing what they could to assist their neighbors. And there was one gentleman on a truck as the news camera went by, screaming and shouting, the government, the government, the government. And the member for Mayaro may know him. I then asked, who is that behaving in that manner? Because they were bypassing people on the street who needed water, who needed the supplies. And they told me that's the chairman in the Mayaro Regional Corporation. And I then saw him every night on television lying to the population that the government did nothing, Madam Speaker. Telling untruth to the population that the government did nothing. I have the sheets from the ODPM of the amount of supplies and resources that were sent to Mayaro. And when we were sending it via the regiment, he refused. Member for Mayaro, I want you to know that chairman said he will pick it up and he will distribute it. And I saw it with my own eyes, him refusing to help people in need. Politics. That was politics at play. We did not see that in the other areas. Could the response time have been better? Maybe. But when you're going into these flooded areas, it is very difficult to get to all of the households with the limited resources. Even if you had 6 boats going into the St. Helena area, it would still be difficult because it was literally scores of houses that were being affected and over expanded periods. I must say, before my time runs out, to my friend from Chaguanas West, that I was shocked to wake up on the morning of Tuesday, the 23rd of October, after he's come here to tell us how to do it, and to read a headline, flood victims kicked out of shelter. I did not believe it. Several families at Ramal Trace, Cunupia, said they were kicked out of the Monroe Road High Hindu School, a designated flood shelter, on Monday after they saw it. What I was shocked to hear is Antoinette Jaikaran, 58, told Guardian Media she and her family were told they needed to leave the school's compound as cleanup crews were going in to sanitize the compound for the resumption of classes yesterday. She said she was told to leave by Chaguanas West Member of Parliament, Ganga Singh. No. There must have been a good reason that the member for Chaguanas West did that. But what I would like to say, contrary to what is being suggested by the member for Chaguanas West, the ODPM did not fail. And I'd just like to correct a little bit of mischief on his part just now. Colonel George Robinson has not in any way been relieved from his duties as the director of SSA. Like every other public servant, he's entitled to leave, and this government has a policy where we're not buying out leave, so he had to take his leave. So that has not happened. Madam Speaker, in closing, I'd like to use the opportunity to thank every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, including those on the other side, because there were a number of members on the other side who were messaging me over the period of time, the member for Caroni Central, even my friend from Couva South and others, giving us the information that we needed of persons who were being affected, persons who were stranded, very useful information. We were then able to feed it in to the apparatus that we had provided and get to people. And I'd end with this, Madam Speaker. The type of disaster flooding that we experienced in that short period of time, starting on Friday, the 19th of October, despite all of the mischief by a handful of individuals, some of whom are directly associated with the other side, claiming that there were fatalities and deaths. I would like to say at this stage, over a week later, we can confirm that there was not a single fatality coming out of that, and I thank God for that. And in ending, Madam Speaker, I use the opportunity once again to thank every man and woman as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and some who weren't, those in the services and those out of the services, and all of those who volunteered for coming together and showing the true spirit of Trinidad and Tobago and helping those in need at a time when they were most in need. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, I will now call upon members to extend greetings on the occasion of Diwali. Would a member for Diego Martin Northeast indicate who will give greetings on behalf of the government?
The Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
The Minister of Culture, Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is indeed an honor to extend warm greetings to our Hindu community as we celebrate the triumph of good over evil, light over darkness, and knowledge over ignorance. The message of Diwali is a victory of self-knowledge and moderation over self-indulgence and profligacy. As we celebrate Diwali with our family and friends, let us reflect on the significance of this important festival and the values and traditions that we pass on to the next generation. Let us celebrate unity in the context of the diversity with which our nation is blessed. It has become far too easy in a country bestowed with so much for us to descend into the sordid, the adverse, to focus on the differences, the dismaying, the gloomy. Why should we focus on these things when we are guided by principles such as those espoused by the Hindu community in celebration of Diwali? We must, as a matter of principle, make this a priority: the promotion and promulgation of good, of peace, light, and knowledge, both in the physical as well as the virtual environments. The physical act of lighting a diya is a powerful symbol of the decision to help, not harm, lift, not denigrate, uplift, not sully. Diwali serves as an annual reminder to us to be our best selves. We are honored to celebrate and share in the traditions of the Hindu community. On behalf of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Shubh Diwali.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to extend warmest greetings to the Hindu community, and particularly the national community in general, and to you, Madam Speaker, and the staff of the Parliament on this the occasion of Diwali 2018. Madam Speaker, in the Hindu home, when you light diyas, from the very first diya that you light, you begin to light all the rest of the diyas. And the symbolism inherent in this is that from that one light has come the many lights that comprise the moving and unmoving, the human and non-human universe in which we live, reflecting the essential oneness of all of us that make up the universe, and the fact that there is but one God from whom we have all come. Madam Speaker, Diwali is celebrated in India for many different reasons, and so too here in Trinidad. But essentially, at the time of Diwali, we pray to Mother Lakshmi, who in the Hindu functional scheme is regarded as the one who is the provider of material benefits as well as knowledge. And she is also the remover of darkness. Our prayers to her and our worship of her is indicative of the belief among Hindus that there is always a higher being upon whom we are dependent for our creature comforts and also for the development of our spiritual selves. Here in Trinidad, like in India and other parts of the world, Diwali is often celebrated and looked at as ushering the new year, and for some, the beginning of a new business calendar. It is like an occasion of thanksgiving for blessings received and prayer for our future well-being. The most widely shared tradition, however, associated with Diwali is the one that connects the festival with the celebration and rejoicing over the return of Lord Rama to his home after a lengthy exile and his defeat of the oppressive and tyrannical Ravan. The citizens of Ayodhya, his city, from which he had been exiled, voluntarily exiled, for 14 years, welcome him home by lighting thousands of lamps, even as over 1 billion Hindus and non-Hindus do today on the continents of Asia, Africa, Australia, Americas, Europe, and here in the Caribbean. And the story of Ram has become perhaps the central narrative of Diwali because it addresses universally the human longing for freedom from tyranny and oppression and the hope of living in a world where there is no fear and where the fullness of the human potential can be realized. Permit me, Madam Speaker, to linger for a moment on the story of Ram. Ravan established and maintained a rule by the exercise of fear and violence. He was intent on conquering and imposing his will throughout the world, enslaving others and taking away their freedom. In fact, under him, the practice of religion was prohibited and brutally suppressed. And his land, his kingdom, was a kingdom that one might describe as arid, ruled by a tyrant with no value for the sanctity of human life and property. And the defeat of Ravan by Ram and liberation from oppression are not the only reasons for the rejoicing and celebration that are central features of Diwali. In fact, Ram is represented as establishing and providing a model for a new society, radically different from the one imposed by Ravan. In fact, Madam Speaker, the poet Tulsidas, the author of the Ramayana, tells us that the return of Ram, whose return we celebrate, ushered in a new human community in which all enjoyed peace and prosperity. In fact, there were four features. Firstly, poverty was overcome, and none suffered for lack of life's necessities. Secondly, illiteracy was overcome, and opportunities for learning were available to everyone. Thirdly, diseases were overcome. No one died prematurely, and all lived healthy lives. Fourthly, violence and hate were overcome, and relationships were characterized by love and by service. The very kind of service, Madam Speaker, that has characterized our country over the last couple of weeks. And one is reminded of a verse in our Holy Scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 17, verse 20, which says, "That service which is given without consideration of anything in return, at the right place and time to one that is qualified, with the feeling that it is one's duty, is regarded as the nature of goodness." And we have seen goodness, Madam Speaker, in our fellow human beings and fellow citizens during our difficult time. That too has been a celebration of light and Diwali. Madam Speaker, it is easy, perhaps even tempting to think that Ram, the embodiment of God on earth, effected the transformation to a beautiful kingdom with the four characteristics in a miraculous sense. If so, we could celebrate Diwali and responsibilities are over until it comes again next year. But such a view does not accurately reflect or represent Rama's nature or mode of action in the world. In fact, throughout the Ramayana, Ram always sought the help of others when he wanted to do things. He always involved others. Everyone was involved, and he was seeking help at all points in time, consulting. And the theological conclusions from that are important. Firstly, that a human community that aspires to be free from poverty, illiteracy, disease, and violence is one that will always align itself with God's purpose. One cannot love God. One cannot celebrate Diwali and be indifferent to the human suffering and to the nature of the community in which one lives. Secondly, we must recognize from Ram's purpose and the celebration of Diwali that God's purposes, for which we human beings have been placed on earth to perform, are accomplished through the cooperation with other human beings. We have a vital role and responsibility in making this community a reality, and it will not be realized without our commitment and cooperation. Madam Speaker, in the kingdom of Ram, people were free to realize and express their unique gifts in the service of each other. The kingdom of Ram was the inspiration for Mahatma Gandhi's vision of an ideal human community that was all-inclusive and committed to the removal of the fundamental sources of human suffering. Madam Speaker, we should not be surprised that the Hindu tradition invested Ram with the attributes of divinity and understood his rule as a vision of what a human community should look like when God is recognized as supreme and ultimate, and when human beings devote themselves to working for each other. On the other hand, the kingdom of Ravan reveals what becomes of community when God and the needs of human beings are displaced by human tyranny. Madam Speaker, Diwali endures, therefore, as a reminder that the struggle between the kingdom of Ram and the kingdom of Ravan is one that is occurring inwardly in our human hearts and outwardly throughout the world in efforts of those who labor and sacrifice for the dignity of others. The lights of Diwali are the inextinguishable flames of faith and hope in the ultimate triumph of goodness over evil. And in that perpetual struggle, let us choose the side of God. Madam Speaker, let us also remember that Diwali does not come to an end when the lights of Diwali go out, but Diwali should endure as a way of life in our hearts, in our minds, and also in our will to do selfless service for the benefit of our communities. Shubh Diwali to everyone.
Honorable members, I join with members who have delivered greetings prior in conveying wishes to the Hindu community and the wider Trinidad and Tobago for a happy and holy Diwali. All of Trinidad and Tobago enjoys Diwali with the celebration of a national holiday. But I respectfully suggest that we contain the merriment which is associated with a celebration and be acutely mindful of the fact that Diwali is a sacred festival. Derived from the Sanskrit term Deepavali, meaning row of lights, Diwali, the festival of light, marks the victory of light over darkness, the dispelling of ignorance by enlightenment, and the triumph of good over evil. The underlying symbolic significance of Diwali is shared by many citizens of other faiths in Trinidad and Tobago, which may lead one to reasonably conclude that in Trinidad and Tobago, Diwali transcends religion, heritage, and ethnicity. As we mark the sacred festival on Tuesday, November 6, 2018, our nation may well be served if we recall our national watchwords of discipline, production, and tolerance. Maybe if each of us embraces and diligently practices discipline, production, and tolerance, the symbolic significance of Diwali may manifest in our national landscape. The watchwords are light-bearing ones targeted at alleviating the darkness of lack, hatred, and ignorance. In closing, I hope that the light of Diwali serves to uplift the spirits and encourage the hearts and the will of those of us who were adversely affected by the recent weather system. Shubh Diwali to all. Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Friday, 9th November 2018 at 10 a.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. In accordance with Standing Order 11 and 12.1, this House now stands adjourned to Friday, 9th November 2018 at 10 a.m.